one of our cast members was dressed up as an evil clown for one scene, and they were hanging out by the curb outside the high school we were filming at, I think just like smoking a cigarette, and a car drove by, and the guy rolled the window down, and there's just this person dressed up as a clown smoking a cigarette on the side of the road, and the guy sticks his head out of the car and goes, "Weirdo!" And I don't know, I like that story.
What I have very fond memories of is a show called Are You Afraid of the Dark? Based on the premise of this, were you watching Nickelodeon on Saturday nights?
Yeah, this is definitely a movie about, in many ways, my relationship with Snick.
Did you have a favorite or story or a monster that scared you when you think back on that?
I think the Are You Afraid of the Dark monster that seared into my memory is the Ghastly Grinner. I don't know if you remember him. Everyone remembers the evil clown. So there was like an evil clown who's famous, but the Ghastly Grinner was like a jester, psycho jester figure. I think he came out of a comic book and spit blue goo out of his mouth.
Obviously, our culture has always been obsessed with nostalgia. I think I recall on that show there was a lot of 50s nostalgia, and now the 90s have come around. What are your thoughts on seeing that, and are you maybe a little skeptical of rose-tinted glasses?
I saw a tweet this morning that was talking about, our cultural obsession with nostalgia being tied to the fact that we can no longer imagine a future as a country or a people, and I think there's a lot of truth in that. I think the impulse to return to something lost, whether that be, like a favorite childhood TV show or a property or a cultural innocence, is, I think, in many ways a conservative impulse. I certainly understand why it would be enticing, because I think we are, it's a human impulse to build these mythologies about our past and about something that, we want to return to. But I do think as we just reboot and remake, there's a desperation and perhaps even like a fear that I feel culturally kind of coming to the fore, that we have to sort of hide in the past because the future feels so unimaginable.
Well, could you talk a little bit about how this movie confronts that?
Yeah, I think that the movie has a complicated relationship to the question of nostalgia. I'm a big fan of an author named Mark Fisher, who does a lot of writing about an idea. He kind of coined this term, hauntology. This sort of idea of, it's almost like a nostalgia's like evil twin. The idea that he sort of posits is that like a hauntological movie feels out of time. It feels like it's engaged in the past and in these sort of aesthetics of another time, whether that be the 50s or the 80s or the 90s. But it's much more of like a specter that haunts you rather than an innocent, warm place to return to. And his theory is very much that because we've sort of entered this period of time where like the future has been deferred under capitalism, that like we cling to these pasts. But in my films, I try to explore this. I don't ignore the allure of nostalgia, but I don't think the movies themselves are nostalgic, or at least if they are, their relationship to nostalgia is more complicated.
Well, even by the title, this movie is also about, not just our relationship with nostalgia, but with media. And specifically, the main character defines himself by his love of media. Do you consider that a healthy thing?
I certainly spent a lot of my life doing it. I, made this movie, I think, reflecting on a childhood and a youth and even part of my adulthood spent sort of dissociating and living vicariously through the screen. Growing up, I loved television, and I didn't feel comfortable existing in my own skin in the real world. And so television and fictional characters kind of became this like parasocial place where I could express myself and express love and feelings and, all of these things that I think you can't really bottle up as a human being, but in a space that was safe and where I didn't need to sort of confront things about myself that I was repressing, in my case, my queerness and my transgender identity. And so I don't think it's a binary answer for me. I look back on that, on those experiences, and I'm quite thankful for them, obviously, and I'm thankful that I was able to sort of find a form of expression through media and culture. Certainly, like having that made me a lot less lonely and perhaps even helped me on my journey. But I also think that I reflect back on those relationships that I had with TV shows that I was just totally obsessed with, to the detriment of perhaps my actual life, and yeah, just see a lot of longing, a lot of like untapped longing in that.
There is a sense of solace in that, and do you think it was more common to have those kind of parasocial connections in a time where we were not so connected, like you could feel isolated from other elements of fandom, or do you think it's more ubiquitous now where people are connected 24/7 on social media?
It feels more ubiquitous now to me, or more normal. Like I think that like when I think back on my childhood, obsessed with the X-Files or Buffy or whatever, I was like the kid in my high school who was an outcast. But you got Swifties everywhere now. I do think that like it's become diffuse, or the way that social media encourages the same kind of parasocial relationship, not with like entertainment or IP, but with people who are creating ideas of themselves for people to engage with who don't actually know them. All the way to just like the way that, and this is something that I reflected on in my first film, which was about people on the internet playing like an online role-playing game, the way that like forms of fiction on the internet can also kind of be utilized to, I think like escape or explore this same kind of sense of longing or dissociation in a way that, for people who are growing up who don't fit in easily in the quote unquote real world, can find similar opportunities that I found in 90s television as a kid.
I've seen it described in some reviews or write-ups as obviously a genre piece, and some have used the word horror, maybe because of A24, but I wonder, is this honest? This feels like a story about identity and a journey of self-discovery, and if self-discovery is self-realization, do you view this as a horror story?
It's a question I get a lot, and I don't know that I have a straightforward answer, because I don't know that I'm the best person to like label it, or I don't go into my creative process like trying to adhere to a genre. That feels like just not generative to me as like the artist. Because I think if you go in saying like I need to make a horror film, then like to me the goal becomes like sort of limited to scaring people or expressing something that like is carried in with expectations. And certainly people will watch the movie expecting a horror movie and have some of those expectations. I think I've always just been drawn to work that is kind of mutant, that is swimming between different genres. And certainly like both of the feature films that I've made so far are movies, if they're not horror movies, they're movies about people who love horror movies, or they're about horror. And so I don't know that I have a simple answer for it. I think it's a very tender film. I think it came from a very vulnerable, emotional, and personal place. And I don't think its main goal is to scare you. But if people want to watch it and enjoy it as a horror film, then that's cool with me too.
What would you hope young people might take away from watching Owen and Maddie's journey in this?
I think for me, I'm always, or not maybe always, but so far I've been making movies that I wish I could have watched at 14 or 15 when I was that kid watching, and loving and searching for myself in fiction and in movies and in television. And so for me, it's like I am trying to make, just like something that could hopefully be comforting if you relate to it. And I don't think that it's something that everyone is going to relate to. And if you don't relate to it, that probably means you had a healthier childhood than I did. But, for folks who see themselves in the characters or see themselves in some of the emotions that the film is trying to express, I hope it does what, like any good piece of art does, which is make you feel a little less alone.
I was digging the 35 millimeter photography as well as the digital, like old school videotape you were using for the show within it. Could you talk about using those techniques?
Yeah, we shot on 35, which was such a joy. My DP and I just like knew we needed to make a film that was absolutely gorgeous. It's a very rich film. It's a very colorful film. and just bringing out in every frame, but especially in some of these frames in the film that are actually quite stylized, just like the richness and detail that grain of 35 can give you was such a holy experience for me. And I'm like already fantasizing about striking a print and getting to actually watch this thing on 35. That's a dream. And then, the TV show in the movie, we actually took the 35 negative, did a digital scan of it, and then output it to VHS tape. So there was like an actual transfer, several transfers, because we had some like messed up old VHS players that distorted all the colors, but I kind of liked that. And so we took that, we did one that was less distorted, we did a beta transfer, and there are actually frames in the movie. It was so fun getting to like play in post-production, because on my first film, which was a very small film, I didn't have the time or the resources to do this kind of stuff. But, we would be in the color correct, layering the 35 negative print on top of VHS scans, on top of beta scans, all in the same frame, and getting to sort of like make the monster in the background look really vivid in 35, but then layering the VHS fuzz and distortion that was real on top of it, and getting to like sort of use the actual format to paint in that way was such a cool part of making the movie.
The grainier, the better. And was it fun or surprisingly strange to revisit your own youth and your own childhood? And I believe you may have even photographed or filmed at some of the places you grew up in.
We didn't film in any actual places I grew up in, although the town that we filmed in was a dead ringer for where I grew up. And I did take my producers with me back to my hometown early in the scouting process, so we could sort of go look at a lot of the locations that inspired the script. Was it fun to return to my youth? It was fun to make the movie. The film is about the uncanniness of growing up in the suburbs, and the way that space both felt very romantic to me because I didn't know much else at the time, and also how that space felt alienating and sinister in ways that I couldn't quite put my finger on when I was 8 years old. And I think it was fun to swim in that world as an artist and return in a very personal way to a lot of those feelings. But I can't say that hanging out in the suburbs looking like I look is the best experience one could enjoy. One of our cast members who plays a lot of the monsters in the movie was dressed up as an evil clown for one scene, and they were hanging out by the curb outside the high school we were filming at, I think just like smoking a cigarette, and a car drove by and the guy rolled the window down and there's just this person dressed up as a clown smoking a cigarette on the side of the road, and the guy sticks his head out of the car and goes, "Weirdo!" And I don't know, I like that story. It's like, yeah, we are weirdos.
Yeah, maybe things haven't changed that much since the night. Well, thank you so much for coming by today.
Thanks so much.